Greetings and salutations, listeners and viewers. Welcome back now to the 11th episode of the Miramichi Historical Linkages podcast. Continuing on from episode 10, we are joined again by Rachel Bernard, and we, as always, are Sarah Ward, Alison Paradis, Tasha Smith, and me, Mr. Dressup. No, Sean McCarthy. That's it. Yeah. So, well, it's been known to happen. I've appeared in a number of guises over the years, but last week we talked a lot about Rachel's time with the Spirits of the River program at Beaubears Island, and her research into Comte d'Espérance and her interpretation of that history and sharing that story with a number of people. Now, we had a near miss last week with her research. We almost got into the topic for today.
My bad.
But so I know you've been waiting, with bated breath for a week to find out what the biggest surprise in Rachel's research was. So I will delay no longer and turn things over for that big surprise. Rachel.
Thank you. Yes, we almost had a flop there, the last one, but no, we're good. We're good. This is interesting because, like I said, it was a full winter of reading material and immersing myself in the story and immersing my character into this story so that I could become this Marie-Jacqueline Bellefontaine in order to do what I was doing. As I said in the previous show, I am originally from Dalhousie. My daughter was born in Dalhousie. We moved when she was a baby, but my roots are in Dalhousie. And of course, myself growing up, Dalhousie was my home. I'm Acadian, so my roots came from Nova Scotia, from Grand Pré. Where they got from point A to point B, I don't know at this point when until 2009. So anyway, in 2009, or at the winter of 2008 and 9, I'm studying. I'm looking, at history, Acadian history, and some of the things that that really caught my eye were the people that were at Camp d'Espérance. There were a variety of age groups. Like there were babies, there were adults, there were teenagers, and these specific young men, which was, another part that I was reading about, 3 or 4 of these young men that were there with no family. I don't know if they got separated along the way, but these 3, 4 young guys were there. And when they first arrived, right at the beginning, which was in the end of summer, beginning of fall, they didn't wait until winter hit. They didn't wait until, everything started to freeze up. They just left. I suppose being teenagers, just like today, they were antsy and they just had to go. So they left. So these 3 or 4 young men took off and made their way up, as anybody would have done at the time, would have followed along the water and made their way up north.
I wonder, quick note, if they took portage trails. Just hit me where I was like, yeah, to go from here to up north, they probably would have taken the portage trails. I'll research that later.
Yeah, research that. Anyway, so my family name is Bernard. My grandfather has he was very big on genealogy, and he has the full tree right down to our ancestor that arrived from France to Grand Pré. So I have all the names. And so the young men that left from Miramichi to go up north, one of them was Charles Bernard. And Charles Bernard is my ancestor. And he made his way up north along with 3 other young boys or young men, 16, 17, whatever. And they all, settled in different pieces of land when they got up north, which was the Dalhousie, Balmoral area and the Charlotte area. And so they got settled there and, had farms, and they became farmers. So, right down to my great grandfather's family, they were all farmers. So I'm reading all of this and I thought, wait now. So I go back and I read in the northern part of the province, the Acadian history. And my ancestor, Charles Bernard, was a really short, chunky kind of guy. As he grew older, he was just, a short, chubby man, and his nickname was Charlot. And so it turns out that the village Charlot was named after him because he was the first settler into that area. Well, the first known settler to be in that area. So I have to say this blew my mind. I don't even know how I told Allison about it, but I went, oh my God, I knew my ancestors settled there, but I didn't know that the name Charlot was named after him. I really had to dig to find that out. And it wasn't that much digging, but I couldn't believe it. His nickname was Charlot, and just the connection. But that was one thing, but that he actually came to Miramichi. So then when I would get into character, that is all I could think about. Had Charles Bernard had he not stopped in Miramichi, where would he have been? Where would I have grown up? You know what I mean? Like that stayed with me for the longest time. I really had to calm it down a little bit because I thought, wow, where would I be right now if he hadn't taken that road, if he hadn't gone that way, so yeah, to me that was, I was quite a discovery. I was, because how often do you get to discover something like that from your own background, right? Allison, how did that make you feel? Because that, you knew my grandfather, your great grandfather, because he died just, about 20 years ago. So you still had a chance to meet him, and he was quite the character, but had I not known that piece of story, I don't know, that just makes it so much richer where I come from anyway.
I think the part that I thought was always really cool is I like to make those like connections of, you and I ended up back in Miramichi long before we knew that he had been here.
Well, we moved here in 2000.
Yeah. And
so
then,
I didn't know.
And then we have my cousin who lives in Charlotte now. And we have, we still have family up in Dalhousie. And so to be able to kind of to find out factually that was the trail our ancestor
I can
took.
Close my eyes and I can just see, what I mean? Just from reading it, I can just see these 4 kids going up and.
Well, and there's something about that like makes me think all the time of was it, I don't know how to say it without sounding cheesy, but was it almost like predetermined, like in our DNA that these were the regions that we were going to stay in, we were going to live in, and we were,
yeah.
Is the same thing that drew him to these certain areas, the same things that drew us to these certain areas, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think about that a lot. I think
Tasha, you wanted to say something?
Oh.
Well, just to branch off of what you guys were discussing about the Portage Trails, when Sean and I were doing that visit at the St. John Archive New Brunswick Museum, I came across those files for Father Pacific. And remember how I asked for your help to translate them, since I'm not very good at reading French, and like 95% of it was written in French. Well, some of it I was looking across. I was asking Sean to translate some of it for me when I was there for the immediate kind of thing. And we were coming across some portage trails that were for sure used by Acadians and the Mi'kmaq people in the Listagouche area. So I'm thinking that maybe we could find some of these answers about these portage trails, and if your mom and you and I could all get together at some point to look at these documentations. And yeah. I think maybe we could connect these dots pretty quick.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the things that are out there for us to discover yet? I mean, I discovered this, and it wasn't supposed to be part of. I just had shivers when I realized that I'm living in Miramichi. I'm acting. I'm standing on a piece of land that my ancestor Charles. I mean, when you're the Mi'kmaq people. I mean, I say that, but they live on their land. But for us, it was we didn't have anything connecting us. But when I read that Charles was there and I'm standing there, I thought that's mind blowing.
I think that's what is so cool to me, is standing somewhere that you know exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, there is somebody who is the reason I am alive right now.
Yeah.
Who stood exactly where I'm standing. I just think that's so fascinating.
Be like that connection. It brings it like builds
Yeah.
it stronger in a sense because you got those roots that are digging
Yeah.
deep in.
Yeah, it makes it feel way more real, like way more, I don't know, meaningful, I guess.
Not just reading it from a book, you're like almost kind of
I was going to
yes,
say that.
exactly.
to an
Right.
extent experiencing it when you're reading. Yeah. I see what
It's
you're
not a
saying.
typical piece of history. It's not a typical piece of history. The typical piece of history is the Acadians were deported, and the Acadians were, they flee, they would flee their area. That we all know. But for me to have that personal connection that way was
Yeah.
extremely,
It's very cool.
mind blowing.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's interesting too when you talk about your last name, Bernard. And I know there's First Nations people that are Bernards.
Yeah.
Yep.
So why does that Bernard name connect it?
Well, see, and I know, so Charles arrived from Grand Pré in Nova Scotia in 1756, 57. So before that, he was there. So I'm not sure, because I know one Bernard came from the region of Poitou in France, and he arrived. So I don't know I don't know, because I know that there are, and that was the first time I heard the last name Bernard. And I think is it in Manapanagag or is it in other regions? But I thought, because at home I had never heard the last name Bernard associated with the Indigenous people, because the Bernards were the French Acadian name. But here I was surprised. And then people would ask me, are you from Metapanagag? I go, no. Yeah.
I actually took a genetic test, like a DNA test.
Oh, is it?
No,
okay. Yeah.
Because I took one of those DNA tests, and they did say, like, there's a certain, I can't remember the exact percentage now, but that in our lineage, there's a certain percent of our DNA that is Indigenous. That I'm curious to know if that would be linked with the Bernard name, or where in my, who knows?
Could be. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
When it comes to First Nation names, actually, I believe in history, Indigenous people had their traditional names, but because government wanted to document things, right? And they couldn't pronounce the Indigenous language. So they gave, to me, I call it label, that they put labels on people's.
Yeah.
So that they can pronounce and they can document and they can keep track of people.
It's interesting because it's the same thing with the French Acadians when they were, in years later when they were settling in and, à Leblanc, in order to get a business or do anything, he had to change his last name to White. Aucoin had to change their names to Wedge. So, things like that. Yeah.
I did not know about Wedge, actually.
Oh, really?
I had no idea that Aucoin was Wedge. When you started saying Aucoin, I was like, what is she going to say? There's nobody with the last name The Corner.
Wedge.
Wedge.
Yeah.
Of course. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, because when you talk to like older Indigenous people, they always say like, I noticed that they'll make comment like, I met so and so and they'll I noticed that here they'll kind of like make a comment like, they say, oh, you're talking about the Gundos, and I can like, okay, they're like have a last name like either Augustine or Ward, whatever. And I asked my husband, why did they say that? They said because I guess Gundo means like a rock or something, because I'm not Mi'kmaq. So anyway, so I said, I guess that's how they kind of like knew which community or which family they belonged to, because it had to do with landscape or environmental, some kind of landmark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. So now when I try to listen to who's who, like,
Yeah.
Because
it's the same thing.
Where I come from, we go by census. Yeah. So we kind of know who's related and who's not related.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand the history of the Mi'kmaq here, how they connected, or like before colonization. How did they relate to each other? How did they know which family? which I know is a lot of them is lost because of the colonization of residential school. People were displaced. So I think people are trying to still connect in a lot of ways. Or like as you're saying, Acadian, we don't really know where we came from. How do we connect to be here? And I think some indigenous people are doing the same thing too, because they didn't have a community to go to after they came out of residential school, because they didn't know which family they belonged to or which community they belonged to. So they settle here and there in certain communities.
Interesting.
And the Acadians have a similar way that I think I've mentioned it to you guys before, that to know somebody's like history, like family history, you would say, like, for example, like my name would be Allison Amario Aloza. So
your
Allison to Mario, who belonged to Loza, who belonged to, like, you know, that. So we kind of do our lineage as you go, which I always thought was interesting. And maybe one of my favorite things, my grandmother she's been dealing with dementia for the last number of years. And she can tell you, like, my son, she'll start at my son and she'll do Theodore all the way up to, I don't know, I think she's at like 8 or 9 generations up, that she still can remember every single name in that lineage. And she's been saying it to me since I was a kid. Like,
you'll be hearing it again tonight, by the way.
And I get to see her tonight. So she will absolutely. So she's my dad's mom. And so so she'll say, you know, Theodore to Allison to Mario to Loza to Theodore to, and then it just keeps going. Michelle. There's like 5 or 6 Michelles in a row. Like, honestly. And if you miss one, she'll correct you. And she'll go, no, yeah, no, cut. She'll say, there's 4 of them. You go, okay. I'm Michelle.
That's one way that we had the connection of generation to generation. But another one was also the merchants. Like a butcher in French, a boucher. And I'm using that as an example because your husband's last name is Boucher. Yeah. And that were names that stuck if you didn't have a last name and we're talking way, way, way back, but, that's how last names were created. And that was, many cultures did that, but the Acadians didn't. Yeah.
I was thinking when we were talking about all this, you said that Charlot was named after your ancestor, and would that have been the last name?
His first name, because he was short and chunky, his nickname was Charlot, which is like and so they took his nickname and named it the village of Charlot.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious, have you come across anything throughout your research of naming places based on what's in that area, like environment? For example, because a couple episodes ago we were talking about I was at Tamaganops River and the place name for that when it's translated from Mi'kmaq, and I'm not fluent. I'm still learning, so I apologize if I butcher this. And anyone can correct me, even our listeners, please and thank you. I'll take in all, pieces of advice. But so de maha would be pipe for a type of pipe for used to smoke out of, and then de moe is tobacco, and those are kind of like along the similar spellings of Tamaganops River. Because the word for Mi'kmaq, it kind of translates to something that looks like a pipe. And from some of the stories and interviews I've done, I've learned that up that river a wee bit, there's supposed to be stone, a type of stone rock there that all Indigenous communities across Canada would go there and travel to get the stone for their stone pipes in order to use for their cultural practices. It's in the midst of becoming a protected land at this moment. But so I was just kind of curious of the connection for Acadians naming places and Mi'kmaq, because we would name it based off of what was there, what we used there, or how it looked. Or like, for another example, I was told Medmanagia is translated into mountains, and our community is located near mountains. Or like, there was another one that's losing my... I know that there's been talk about Miramichi being a Mi'kmaq word, and I actually want to talk to a few more people before I find like the actual translation of that meaning, but just something along those. Like, I was Curious.
It's interesting you say that from Miramichi because I'm not sure if Sean can chime in on this one. I think Sean helped me with that one, Sean and Peter, when we were trying to go through what Miramichi actually meant, and it was the river that splits, and it was Mi'kmaq for the river that splits. Or do you remember that, Sean? I mean, because we went back and forth on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where we landed in 2009, but I know myself in the meantime and in the in-between time, I've definitely been told a lot of different translations for what Miramichi means. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Because I think we were George, and he called it Little Restagush, right? Little Restagush, Restagush Cheech or something like that is what he called. He said that was the original name. Then I talked to Catfish, Lloyd Guinness, and he had a couple of stories that had to do with the Miramichi. He pronounced them, and we call it Miramichi, but he pronounced it differently. And he said that means the White River or something like that. But he had pronounced it. I think it would be good to talk to Lloyd to get that his version of it. But I know that I've been here for 30-something years, and I'm still trying to figure out what or who named Miramichi or what it means. Like, I asked him, it's always a different story.
Well, and we can't forget. We can't forget that it was Chatham and Newcastle too, right? So I do wonder, like it's the history of it being the Miramichi is not.
We're talking about the river, I guess, mostly. Then, if you're going to go there, yeah.
Yeah, but so if we were able to see like why we decided to turn it all into Miramichi, then it should be easier to be able to find, you would think. I don't know.
I know, I think of up north, I'm from Dalhousie, and I know the original name, that's not the original name. They were all indigenous areas. But the town of Dalhousie itself was named after a captain whose name was Dalhousie. So, and he wasn't French, and I know nothing about that part of the history, but I've read it a long time ago. It just never stuck with me, but it was after a boat captain.
I think we talked about this before too, that a lot of Acadian names are like deeply rooted in like religious figures. So a lot of Saint Louis and even, Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. Like there's just a lot of places that are named after religious figures, even when it's not, like obvious, because there's a lot of them that will be like named after, their first name or their family name or whatever. And they don't all necessarily have the saint, blah, blah, blah. I did find, we did talk about this a little bit before, that the indigenous way of naming an area is usually based on what is there. And then the Acadian way is based on like who was there. Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is very interesting that was our approach.
And also, I mean, the fictional story of Evangeline had a lot to do with some of the places that were named after that. That story came out, which was, I mean, it wasn't that long ago compared to some of the villages that were named. But I mean,
I'd love to know.
And Gabrielle.
Yeah, I'd love to know why they named the town of Souris after a mouse.
It's probably not a mouse, Allison.
But it could be.
But I doubt it.
Yeah, but it sure could be. Is there a mouse named Evangeline?
Well, the Acadian Peninsula there is more in the southern part,
yes.
And up on the western is more of the Acadian. So try to Google Souris instead of Souris.
Souris, which is it's French for either mouse or.
Let's go with Smile. The village called Smile.
I think Sugi means grandmother, right, in Mi'kmaq?
Really?
Yeah, I think that's what it means. Sugi. grandmother?
I'm gonna say I don't really
Megaju?
say that word very often, but I don't know, to be honest, because I was kind of told, was it Migaju was grandmother as well? Because one of my grandmothers go by Juju.
Yeah. There's
And then
Megaju
there's,
and there's
I don't know
Suki.
if this one.
No, aunt. It means an aunt, I
Suki?
think. It's an aunt.
Oh,
That Suki's your aunt.
okay.
Yeah, that's what it means. Aunt. Yeah.
Aunt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, aunt.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm learning. After 30 years, I'm learning.
We both are.
Welcome back, Allison.
Thank you. My iPhone died. It went from 100% to 0% in this recording session, but I knew it was going to happen, so I had my iPad ready to go the second I needed to switch. I just wasn't fast
Warren
enough.
is forearmed. One example that, and again, I may be showing my ignorance here, so please do correct me if I'm wrong. Of an example of kind of a geographic naming feature that I think comes from settlers, I think from Acadians, but I could be wrong because this is out of my area. But I think somebody tell me about Petitcodiac, about the tiny elbow. It's named after the tiny elbow in the river, which is that's French, right?
Petit coude.
Like tiny elbows, yeah.
I originally
That's so
thought that.
So I don't
name-
know. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I
I've
thought
heard
the
that.
original name was actually first like an indigenous.
I did too.
Yeah. Unless there would have been a
Did Dyson
section
name it?
that would have been Petitcoude inside Petitcodiac.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like not so much maybe the community, but the river that it got. And again, I mean that one version of its
Right.
name, right? So that's it. Not to say that it's
There was an elbow.
be all and end all name, but yeah, that's it.
Interesting.
And of course-
Interesting.
And of course, to kind of draw this all back to where we started, I mean, probably one of the best, one of the ones that first comes to my mind, of course, in terms of names of places, is of course Beaubears, right? So
Boisvert.
that's it. Starting off, of course, as and again, my apologies for pronunciation, but Guaminigook, the island of the pines. Then to l'île de Boisbert, then to Beaubears Island. And I mean, it's interesting, for me as I was doing the research, to be able to see kind of the slow transformation of, l'île de Boisbert, Boishebert, and then early maps going Boisbere, so Bois Bear,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then slowly, then Boebere, and then Beaubair, and then eventually to where it's spelled today. So this slow transformation.
It's called plain
of it
telephone.
becoming kind of.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. some cartographers writing this down,
Yeah.
and somebody's telling them what this would be called. You know what I mean? So yeah, but like I say. But yeah, and then to kind of understand, because again, I know that I was with you on that trip to Bonaventure in 2016, and again, there was a sense of what is the name of this piece of land, and to understand today that the interpretation speaks about all three, but that's something that again that I think that the Friends of Beaubears are often discussing, you know what I mean, and how we understand and call that place.
I'll do a little fun fact here before we wrap up this episode to say that in Miramichi we have Carrefour Beausoleil from Beausoleil-Broussard. Beausoleil-Broussard is the great grandfather of Beyonce Knowles.
But they don't.
Rachel, don't rain on my parade right now.
They don't brag about it.
No, we have talked about how it got to that point because of slavery.
Yes.
Bad news.
Mm.
Shouldn't have done that. There's no excuse for that. But it is true that that's kind of where that lineage came from.
Mm-hmm.
So just saying, if Beyonce wanted to come and visit Miramichi,
The Acadian.
I'd be more than happy
Yeah.
to give her a tour of the school.
We could be related.
We could be related. That's where I got my singing abilities
There
from.
you go. From your
Oh.
long lost cousin, Beyonce.
Beyonce. The Knowles family, but of course.
Somebody just volunteered to do the Christmas jingle, I think, Sean.
There you go. Thank you, Sarah.
Do it
Thank
Beyonce
you.
style.
Sorry, my take.
Well, that was great. Thank you guys for inviting me, for bringing all these memories back. It's really cool. I've had a lot of fun chatting with all of you, and I've learned from you guys just as much as I'm giving out the information. So thank you for all of that.
Rachel, thank you for being our guest and also for being my mother. It is appreciated.
Anytime.
Cool. I'm going to come over for supper.
Yes, you are.
Yes, well, I echo half of those sentiments, as you are not my mother, but, thank you very much for joining us. I'm very grateful for my own mother. Mom, I hope you're listening. But
oh, yeah.
That's it. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, dear listeners, for watching these last 11 episodes. We're going to be taking a break over the holidays, but we will be back again in January. And I would also, of course, like to thank all of my colleagues, Tasha, Sarah, Allison, for participating in all these episodes and bailing me out on occasion. So we definitely hope that each and every one of you enjoy the festive season in the way that you most enjoy and with the people that you like to enjoy it with. Like I say, I know myself. I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to sitting down and watching my favorite Christmas movie, Ernest Saves Christmas. So, whatever your favorite, holiday flick may be, you know what I mean? Or music or any of that. We hope that you enjoy it all through the season. And we wish you all the best, and we will see you once again in the new year. Anything more from the panel?
I'd like to leave everybody on a quote from Beyonce.
Oh my God.
Just to wrap things up. I believe she once said, "Merry Christmas."
Know what I mean?
So,
That was deep. Thank you.
thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
And a Happy New Year.
Yes.